All right, welcome everyone. It's a little after 1, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for our virtual Kitab talk, which is a collaboration between the UNC Chapel Hill University Libraries and the UNC Chapel Hill Center for Middle East and Islamic Studies. In our virtual world, we're thrilled that we're able to move these talks, these bi-semesterly talks online and share them beyond UNC with interested students, faculty, and librarians. My name is Emma Harford, and I'm the outreach coordinator for the Center for Middle East and Islamic Studies, and we welcome you all today. So I'm thrilled to turn it over to Rustin Zarkar. He is our Middle East and Islamic Studies librarian at UNC Chapel Hill, and he joined us in January of this year, and we're so thrilled to have him on board and to be coordinating these talks.
Thank you very much, Emma, for that gracious introduction. So I'm very happy that you all have joined us today. This is really exciting that we can have this conversation online. And today I want to introduce you to our guest, a lecturer, Jacob Hill. He is the project and data manager for the Digital Library of the Middle East at Stanford University. He is also a doctoral candidate at the School of Information and Library Science here at UNC. So yeah, this is a fantastic new project. I believe it was just released this year, and they're doing some fantastic work, and I would love to hear more about it, and I'm sure the rest of you will too. So I'll let Jacob take the floor. Welcome, Jacob.
Thank you. Let me just share my screen. Okay, so sorry about that, but I'm very happy to be here. I'm excited to present about the project and really to hopefully open a bit of a discussion about the project and its future. I wanted to share a little bit of context about the presentation before diving in. I've been at the kind of intersection of Middle Eastern, Islamic studies. I do research in Baha'i studies and read in Arabic and Persian, and have had that interest for a long time. And also I'm a doctoral candidate in information science. And so I've kind of been on the fence about between these two fields for a long time. And that's given me a particular, it's given me a lot of time to think about the intersection of these two domains. And the presentation is really coming from that perspective, and hopefully we'll share some insights that will be useful. I think one of the challenges with a project like this is it's built by developers who are not experts in the field, and then it's built and then it's used by experts in the field that don't always really understand the full technical scope of the project or the possibilities. And so we're really trying to bridge that gap a little bit. And now that we have the application up and running, we have funds to improve the application and add new features. We really want that work going forward to be informed by people who are using the application in the way it was intended to be used, or who maybe can even find, holes in our vision, in our plan that we didn't, things that didn't occur to us when we were developing the application. So, this is an attempt to do that, to present a little bit about the project, really from, what goes into making a project like this, what goes into adding data, and then to kind of invite comments and discussion, so that we can engage in a bit of a discussion about how best to get the most out of the project currently, and how your current use of the project could inform the future development of the application. So in one sense, DLME is an aggregation project, much like Europeana or the Digital Public Library of America. It was envisioned as a tool for collecting resources about the Middle East and North Africa that are already on the web and presenting them through a single web application. And from this perspective, the goal is really to improve access to these resources they're already available, but they may not be widely known, to increase discoverability, to help researchers, scholars, students, teachers find new resources that are out there already, and to enhance interoperability. There could be collections that have some synergy, but if they exist in two separate websites, then it's really hard to search them collectively, or to benefit from some of the maybe cross-pollination that is potentially there between two collections. And so aggregating them really makes new possibilities for interacting with the resources capable. So that's really the most obvious sense of what the DLME is. But from the very beginning, we realized that it has to be something more than that. It can't just be the application. It really has to be about a network of people collaborating in the region with similar goals, sharing knowledge, sharing labor, building capacity, perhaps developing common standards and patterns for doing things, so that these projects and others like them become more of a possibility going forward. So the aggregation aspect of the project is really kind of we're moving ahead fully with that. The application is built, it has data, we're adding data constantly. We have a long list of data providers that we're working through and developing relationships. The network of collaborators is in motion, but it's also not fully formed. We have a lot of relationships that we've developed over the last few years, but we really don't know what shape this will take going forward. We had some plans, and then coronavirus changed those plans, and so at the moment everything is kind of up in the air, and we're really very much in an exploratory stage with respect to this aspect of the project. So just a little bit of history funding. We got a grant from the Whiting Foundation in May 2017 to build a prototype, a kind of proof of concept of what the Digital Library of the Middle East could be, and spent 6 months throwing something together really quickly. And the full focus was really on the technical possibility. Can we make all of this work? And prove that it works. And so the data that was selected during this period was chosen because we had a relationship with the institution. It would be easy to get that data, and it was somewhat representative of different object types, right? We wanted videos, we wanted 3D objects, we wanted images, we wanted text, we wanted all the things that we imagined would eventually be in DLME. We used that prototype to get a 2-year grant from the Mellon Foundation to really build the application that we wanted to build, right? And so at that point, we basically went back over all of the data that was added. We developed a team of curators that reviewed each data set. And we took some things out that they made sense from a technical testing standpoint, but not necessarily from a curatorial standpoint. Those objects were taken out, some stayed in, and then a lot of new data sets were added, and a lot of new technical features were added. And so we spent 2 years doing that. And that was really the launch that happened this year. The application has been on the web since December 2017 or maybe January 2018, but it's been very much in a prototype kind of phase, and now we're officially operating as a service that students and teachers and researchers can use, and we have people responding to feedback requests or questions, queries that they might have. And we're ongoing maintaining the application, and we're doing a lot of work to think about the next steps. So in April we started a 3-year grant with Qatar National Library, and the goal is very much to just continue adding resources to make it more useful, We want to do a lot of user research to figure out what features to develop. You know, we have some development time scheduled, we have funds for development, but we don't want to just build things that we think we could build. We want to prioritize potential features that might be most useful to users. And so we really need to do that user research to figure out what those features might be. And then, of course, we also will be focusing on formalizing some of these relationships that we've developed and trying to solidify the other aspect of the project, which is kind of developing this network of collaborators. So this is a technical kind of drawing that we host on our GitHub page to describe the technical kind of relationship between a number of different components. It could be a little bit intimidating, but hopefully you're not concerned about it. I think it is useful to understand the pathway that data goes through to actually get into the application. In the top right corner, you see this public website with the number 6 next to it. That's usually the only thing users see, but there's this whole other, process and components behind that that make what you see on the public website possible. And it really informs the understanding of potential lines of development that we could take, for features that could be developed versus features that are they're nice, but they're kind of wishful thinking in terms of the context that we're operating under, or they're just not. They can't be the next step because all of these other steps would need to happen first. So in the top left corner, the clouds, these are content providers, and this is kind of where we start. We find libraries or archives or even digital humanities projects or other kinds of institutions that have resources about the Middle East on the web already. We're not scanning resources ourselves. We're not hosting them ourselves. We're starting with projects that already exist on the web. Once those are identified, we add them to our database, and they're all reviewed by the curatorial advisors and prioritized based on their fit for the project. Is it really about the Middle East, and the overall quality of the resources. Any collection that's prioritized, we reach out to that data provider and try to establish some kind of partnership, a relationship in which they agree to share their data, and we kind of collaborate in ways that we can to try and figure out how to make their data more discoverable, and also potentially improve it over time, or give them feedback on it that we get from our users, or other things that might be beneficial to them. So once an agreement is reached, then it's my job to figure out how to harvest their records from their website or their server, or in some cases, they may just even share them with me in an Excel file if that's the only way they can figure out how to get me the data. So we take it in whatever form we can get, and we load it in number 2, the GitHub data. So we have a repository in which all of our data is loaded. It's in GitHub. It's open on the web. Anyone can kind of see what the incoming data looks like. And it comes in all kinds of forms, XML and JSON and different descriptions in different languages. We have metadata in Turkish and French and Arabic and English and other languages, Spanish. So we have to take all of these different formats, and we have to convert them into some kind of common format that can be loaded into a single application. And so once the metadata is there, I have to write what we call a config file that basically takes each field in the incoming metadata and maps it to the appropriate field in our own DLME schema. So it's a lot of testing and iterating and making sure that we get the right fields in the right place and that the data is coming out clean like it's supposed to. And once we're complete, once we've completed that, we load it in a staging environment, which is not displayed on this diagram. And we invite the data provider to look at it and make sure that we mapped everything correctly, that we didn't misinterpret one of their fields, or that there's not any errors in the mapping. And of course, they might not see everything, but it definitely cuts down on the number of possible errors. So if anything's identified, we fix those and then reload it into our this AWS. It's essentially, we put it on the server somewhere on a particular server. And then I can access the website myself, an admin panel from the website, and load it into our database, where it's indexed and stored in another Solr database where you can actually search it through the public interface. So this data comes this way and goes through all these steps before it gets to the public website. And so each of these steps introduces challenges and also opportunities for improving the data, adding new features, a good understanding of, even a good basic understanding of some of these steps could make it very clear like why we can do some things but we can't do other things. And I'm hoping that this conversation will, illumine this process a little bit for teachers and experts in the region who are not necessarily technical experts, to be able to, understand what is possible, what's, what next steps could be done, and help us prioritize those. So just to help illustrate this a little bit, we can look at a couple examples. So this is one example of a record, and this is kind of like an ideal record. So you have good metadata describing the collection, like date, description, the language it's in, subject terms, rights, statements, things like that. It's available also fully described in Arabic. We want DLME, the website itself is fully translated into Arabic and English, but not all of the metadata necessarily is. We're not translating records one by one. So if it doesn't come in Arabic, then we can only translate certain fields that we can automate. But this is a good example. It's fully described in English, fully described in Arabic. This nice viewer that you see, it's a viewer built at Stanford, but it's because the metadata is in a particular form called IIIF, which is a way that images are described and shared on the web. And if the metadata is in that form, then we can load it and we can do all kinds of neat things, like we can actually pull the full resource into DLME and browse it and load it into full screen and all of these other things. There's even annotation features that we could enable if we decided to, that are already built into this tool, where a scholar could make annotations and other scholars could see that. And so this is a common standard that many libraries are using, but not all. And obviously, it provides some benefit, and we hope to increase usage. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have resources like this, where all we get is a thumbnail image pulled in, and there's virtually no metadata. So the only metadata is this contributor statement and the rights statement. We've actually added the item contributor and data contributor. And so, we don't want to turn these things down. It has a title. It has a thumbnail. It has a contributor. Someone could discover it, search it, and then you can still click on this link to view it on the provider's website. So it's still useful. So it's loaded in, but it's not really ideal from a access or discovery standpoint. You're obviously limited to the language it's described in. So if you're searching in Arabic, you're not going to get it. These are Turkish titles. I assume people who are searching for that would know how to search for that. But obviously we would want to, improve those kinds of descriptions over time. But this just gives you an idea. The metadata comes in a wide variety of standards and described to different extents. So depending on what's there, that's what we're able to load. We can't really add too many new fields. The fields that we can add, and we do add to all fields, that there's a shift in context from a data provider to a website like DLME, and so we add some contextual fields like data contributor, essentially where did we get the metadata from, and item contributor, who has the physical object, who has the manuscript, or who has the video. In many cases these are the same, but in some cases they're different, and so we created both of these fields. Sometimes object type is there, but we can add that when it's not. If we get a collection of manuscripts, and if that collection is loaded on the web and there's only manuscripts in there, it's not really useful to display that they're manuscripts. But when you load those manuscripts in with a bunch of videos and other types of objects, it's useful to add that field. And so in DLME, we try to add that field consistently for all records whenever possible. And then we try and add right statements, and we can simply pass on, whatever statement applies to a whole collection. And so we can add these fields. And then we try to normalize fields whenever possible. And so by normalize, I simply mean put it into a standard format so that it can be described consistently across the application. So, for example, one institution might call their type text, and another might be more granular and call it book or manuscript or something, right? We just want to make that consistent across the whole application, so that two things that are the same are not being described by different words, or two things that are different are accidentally being described by the same word, right? So we are able to normalize the type field and kind of subtypes. We've added some subtypes there as well. We've been able to normalize language so that, Arabic is always spelled with a capital A, and it's not just ARA, and there's not like 5 different ways of describing the same thing as saying the same thing, like this resource is in the Arabic language. And then dates. We have been able to largely take in a lot of different date formats and basically convert them into one common format. And then to even take that common format and get the Hedry equivalent, so that we can filter by date in Hedry or in Gregorian calendar. And we've already identified some improvements that we want to make to that filter. And then, we're exploring translating certain fields. We want to enhance the description in Arabic. And so we're working on that. We don't have the resources to do this manually. And we've run into a challenge just trying to figure out, if we were to change metadata on our end, how can we pass that back up to the data providers so that our data stays in sync, right? And so that's a problem that we're trying to figure out. And if we can figure out, then that will enable more possibilities for enhancing the metadata. But with something like place names, it's relatively easy to do automated translations, and they're pretty accurate. And we don't really display these in the record field, but we do use them for search. So it enhances search. If someone's interested in searching over records from a particular region, and they're searching Arabic names, or vice versa, we can translate from Arabic to English. We'll have a full coverage in both languages for these fields. So this is kind of like a background, technical background to the project, and also a process background of like how we add data to the project, and what changes we make versus what's coming in from the data provider. this talk is really what I was hoping is that it would invite some participation in helping us determine, you know, what are the next steps for improvement? What features do we want to add? We know there are some things we want to do to enhance usability. You know, we want to continue to complete metadata descriptions whenever possible. And we know some fields are easier to add on our end than others. Some things really require that network of collaboration component, right? We can't take the metadata records that have no description, just have a couple fields and describe them all ourselves. But those institutions in the Middle East, maybe they can't describe them either because there's a lack of funds or there's a lack of expertise. And so this becomes a common problem that we're trying to work with that institution to figure out how do we solve this? How can we make this, how can we describe these resources better so that people can actually find them and use them? And that we can create more possibilities for interactions with other collections that are already in DLME. We want to improve the accuracy of metadata, obviously. In many cases, you know, if a librarian is describing a resource, you know, we got a feedback for dates, for example, where the date range was just really broad, you know, and they chose a date range in the safest possible way because they didn't want to get the wrong date. But then a scholar was looking at it and they were clearly able to narrow it down to a much narrower range of dates. And so, you know, that's a possibility. You know, how can we improve the metadata and then share it back with the data providers so that our data and theirs stays in sync. And then, of course, you know, I just threw this one out as an example because I feel like scholars ask for it all the time, full text search. And there's all these other features that we could add. And, you know, we don't know which ones to add. Obviously, one perspective is to focus on the ones that are easiest to add, but then another perspective is to really figure out what's worth doing the extra work. You know, what would make the application really helpful and effective versus what would be like a nice little feature to have, but not really that big of a deal when it comes to actual usability. Before we open up for questions, I wanted to share a couple ways to give feedback. So we have this little feedback tab up here where you can report any kind of errors. It pre-fills the URL of the resource that you're looking at. So if you see like a problem record, you know, you can report that there, but you can also just put in general comments about the application, things that you want to improve, things that you would like to see differently, or even questions. Any kind of feedback is welcome. We also have a suggest a collection form where you can access in Arabic or English, and you can suggest a collection that exists. So if you know of a collection of manuscripts or videos or audio files or something about the Middle East that you don't see in DLME, you could, of course, you know, do some research on our GitHub and see if we have plans to add it, but that's not necessary. You can just go ahead and suggest it. And if we already have it in the works, then, you know, we already have it. But if not, then we'll definitely add it, and we'll try to put that in the pipeline to get it reviewed by the curatorial advisors and to try and add it if it fits our criteria. And then if you want to just stay kind of up to date with the project, you can sign up for our listserv and you'll get periodic updates, possibly for new collections or for new features or for events that we host. And so those are a few ways that you can stay in touch with the project. And I'm also happy to consult with anyone one-on-one if there's more general kind of questions. I'm easy to find on the web. You can just Google my name and find my Stanford profile and contact information. And I'm happy to chat with any of you if one of these forms of connecting is not ideal. So that's what I have for kind of a formal presentation, and I'll just open it up to any questions or comments anyone might have.